In the remote wilderness of Siberia, where winters blanket the world in endless white and forests stretch beyond the horizon, a story unfolded that would challenge everything we know about gratitude, loyalty, and the deep bonds between humans and wild creatures. What began as a simple act of kindness by 76-year-old Anna Petrovna would lead to a series of events so extraordinary that even hardened hunters and wildlife experts would shake their heads in disbelief. Anna's small wooden cabin stood in solitude among towering pines, 30 kilometers from the nearest village of Krasny. Her closest neighbor lived an hour's walk away, and in winter, when snow blocked the narrow dirt road, she could go weeks without seeing another human face. Most would find such isolation unbearable. But for Anna, this wilderness had been her sanctuary since her husband's passing 15 years ago. On a bitter winter morning in 2019, as temperatures plunged to -40 degrees and the wind howled like a hungry wolf, Anna heard unusual sounds coming from her storage shed. The noise carried a tone of desperation, weak, pleading whimpers that pierced the frozen air. She had lived in these woods long enough to recognize every cry of the wilderness, and these sounds spoke of something young, something afraid. Wrapping herself in her warmest coat, Anna ventured into the biting cold. Snow reached her knees, and each step required effort. As she neared the shed, the cries grew louder, filled with an urgency that tugged at her heart. She pushed open the heavy wooden door and gasped. Huddled in the corner were 3 bear cubs, their small bodies trembling from cold and hunger. Later, she would learn from local hunters that their mother had been killed by poachers who had taken her for her gallbladder, leaving the cubs to face certain death in the merciless Siberian winter. They were black bear cubs, no more than 3 months old, their eyes wide with a fear that transcended species. Most people would have called the authorities or simply closed the door, knowing the dangers of interfering with wild bears. But Anna saw something in their eyes, a silent plea for help that she couldn't ignore. Against every warning and against all conventional wisdom, she chose to act. She named them Boris, Natasha, and Misha, though she never treated them as pets. Every wildlife expert who heard of her actions warned that she was making a grave mistake. Bears were wild creatures, they said. If they survived, they would either become too dependent on humans or grow aggressive as they matured. The local ranger, Victor, even made the journey to her cabin just to warn her that she was risking her life. But Anna stood firm. Sometimes, she believed, kindness had to rise above logic. For 3 months, she fed them, sheltered them, and helped them grow stronger. She maintained a careful distance, ensuring they did not become too accustomed to human contact, while giving them the support they needed to survive the harsh winter. Then, as the first signs of spring appeared, the cubs did what nature intended. They left. One by one, they ventured into the vast Siberian wilderness, disappearing into the trees. Anna stood at the edge of her cabin, watching them go. She had given them a chance at survival, but what she didn't know was that this was not the end of their story. It was only the beginning. They had grown stronger, their fur glossy and thick, their movements confident. Anna watched them disappear into the undergrowth with a mixture of sadness and satisfaction. She thought her part in their story had ended, believing they would forget her as they embraced their wild nature. She had no way of knowing that these bears would remember her scent, her voice, and most importantly, her kindness. No one could have predicted how these 3 bears would return at crucial moments in her life, repaying her compassion in ways that would leave the entire region stunned. The events that followed would span the next 5 years. The bears would grow into powerful adults, but instead of forgetting their benefactor, they would demonstrate a level of intelligence, loyalty, and gratitude that would make headlines across the country. They would save Anna's life not once, but 3 times, each rescue more incredible than the last. Their actions would challenge our understanding of animal intelligence and prove that gratitude knows no species barrier. This is the story of how 3 orphaned cubs became guardian angels to an old woman who once showed them mercy. It is a testament to the profound truth that kindness, even in its simplest form, can return to us in ways we never imagined possible. 2 years passed since Anna had last seen the bears. Life in the wilderness continued its natural rhythm, and though she often thought of her wild charges, she had made peace with never seeing them again. Winter had arrived early that year, bringing with it one of the harshest cold snaps in recent memory. The thermometer outside Anna's cabin had frozen solid at -50 degrees. On a particularly brutal December morning, Anna faced a life-threatening situation. Her firewood supply was running dangerously low. The scheduled delivery from the village hadn't arrived due to blocked roads, and without wood, she would freeze to death within days. Despite the dangers, she had no choice but to venture into the forest to gather whatever fallen branches she could find. Bundled in every layer she owned, Anna set out with her small sled, following a path she had used countless times before. The forest was silent except for the cracking of frozen branches and her labored breathing. The cold air felt like knives in her lungs. She managed to gather some wood, though the effort left her exhausted. But as she turned to head home, she realized with growing horror that the gently falling snow had covered her tracks. The forest in winter could be treacherous. Every tree looked identical under its blanket of white. Anna tried to remain calm, remembering her husband's old advice about following the direction of the wind, but panic began to set in as the light started to fade. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and she knew that being lost in these conditions meant certain death. After an hour of wandering, her strength began to fail. Her fingers had lost all feeling, and her vision was becoming blurry. She stumbled and fell several times, each time finding it harder to get up. As darkness approached, Anna realized she was experiencing the early stages of hypothermia. Her thoughts became confused, and an overwhelming desire to sleep crept over her. Just as she was about to give in to exhaustion, a deep rumbling sound cut through the gathering darkness. At first, she thought it was the wind playing tricks on her failing senses. Then she heard it again, closer this time. Through the swirling snow, a massive dark shape emerged. As her vision focused, she recognized Boris, now a fully grown male black bear. He had grown enormous, his shoulder height matching that of a tall man. But what happened next defied all natural behavior. Boris approached her slowly, and then began walking in circles around her, his huge paws leaving deep impressions in the snow. He was creating a visible trail. Then, to Anna's astonishment, two more bears appeared. Natasha and Misha had also grown impressive in size, though not quite matching their brother. The three bears surrounded Anna, and Boris gently nudged her with his nose, urging her to stand. When she struggled to her feet, they positioned themselves around her. Boris took the lead, while Natasha and Misha flanked her sides. Slowly, deliberately, they began guiding her through the forest. Anna was now living a moment that would later be deemed impossible by wildlife experts. Three full-grown wild bears were escorting a human through a blizzard, carefully matching their pace to her weakened state. When she stumbled, they would wait. When she began to veer off course, they would grunt softly to correct her direction. After what seemed like hours but was probably only 40 minutes, the familiar shape of her cabin emerged from the gloom. The bears had led her home, using a route that avoided deep snowdrifts and dangerous ice patches. But their assistance didn't end there. While Natasha and Misha stood guard, Boris disappeared into the forest, returning minutes later, dragging a fallen log nearly twice his length. Throughout the night, the bears made several trips into the forest, bringing back enough firewood to fill Anna's depleted store. They worked with purpose and coordination that showed not just intelligence, but genuine concern for her welfare. Only when her wood supply was fully restocked did they finally melt back into the darkness of the forest. The next morning, Anna's nearest neighbor, Dmitry, arrived on his snowmobile to check on her after the blizzard. He found her cabin warm and well supplied with wood. When Anna told him what had happened, he initially refused to believe her story, but the enormous bear tracks in the snow, the carefully dragged logs, and the clear path they had created told a tale that couldn't be denied. Word of the incident spread through the nearby villages. Wildlife researchers and journalists began making inquiries, but the bears had vanished into the vast wilderness, leaving only their tracks and an incredible story of repaid kindness. The story of Anna's rescue by the bears had transformed her status in the region from a solitary widow to a local legend. Some dismissed her account as the imaginings of an old woman, while others saw it as proof of the mysterious bonds that could form between humans and wild creatures. But Anna herself paid little attention to the speculation, continuing her quiet life in harmony with the wilderness. Spring arrived, bringing with it an unexpected threat. The pristine forests around Anna's cabin had attracted the attention of illegal loggers. These were not local woodcutters taking trees for their homes, but organized criminals with heavy machinery who stripped entire hillsides bare. Their activities had been pushing wildlife from their natural habitats, forcing desperate animals closer to human settlements. One warm morning in May, Anna woke to the distant sound of chainsaws. Through her window, she could see 3 large trucks parked at the edge of her property. 6 men in work clothes were surveying the area, marking trees with spray paint. Their presence meant more than just the destruction of the forest. Remote cabins like Anna's often disappeared during such operations, their elderly residents dismissed as unfortunate accidents in the wilderness. Anna's heart raced as 2 of the men approached her cabin. She had no phone, no way to call for help. The nearest police station was hours away, and she knew these men operated with the protection of corrupt officials. As they reached her porch, one of them knocked roughly on her door, demanding she come out to discuss the new logging operation. Just as Anna was about to face the intruders, a deep roar echoed through the clearing. The sound was so powerful, it seemed to shake the earth itself. From 3 different directions, Boris, Natasha, and Misha emerged from the forest. They had grown even larger since their winter rescue, their muscles rippling under thick black fur as they moved with deliberate purpose. The loggers froze in disbelief. They were facing not 1 bear, but 3 fully grown black bears moving in coordinated formation. Boris took the center position, his massive form casting a shadow over the men on Anna's porch. Natasha circled to their right, while Misha blocked their path back to the trucks. What happened next demonstrated a level of strategic thinking that would later baffle wildlife experts. The bears did not attack outright, which would have been the natural response of territorial wild bears. Instead, they orchestrated an elaborately threatening display. Boris stood on his hind legs, reaching a terrifying height of over 7 feet, and brought his paws down on Anna's metal water barrel, crushing it flat. Natasha and Misha began systematically destroying the loggers' equipment, flipping their fuel containers and tearing through the truck's tires with powerful swipes of their claws. The message was clear. The bears were showing the intruders what they could do to them, while deliberately choosing not to. This display of controlled power and restraint was unprecedented in wild animal behavior. The loggers, having witnessed their expensive equipment being methodically destroyed, quickly retreated to their damaged vehicles and fled. But the bears' protection didn't end with driving away the immediate threat. Over the next several weeks, they established a patrol pattern around Anna's property. Local hunters reported seeing them marking an unusually large territory centered on her cabin. They left visible claw marks on trees at regular intervals, creating a boundary that even the most hardened criminals learned to respect. Their behavior caught the attention of wildlife researchers from a university in Novosibirsk. Trail cameras were set up with Anna's permission, capturing footage that would later feature in international nature documentaries. The bears were documented working in coordinated shifts, with at least one always maintaining watch over Anna's cabin, while the others foraged or rested. Most remarkably, they showed an understanding of human threats versus welcome visitors. When the local doctor made his monthly visits to check on Anna's health, the bears would appear briefly, observe from a distance, and then withdraw once they seemed satisfied with the visitor's intentions. They demonstrated an ability to differentiate between genuine threats and normal human activity that went far beyond standard animal behavior. The loggers never returned to Anna's part of the forest. The bears had established her land as an island of protection, preserving not just her safety, but the surrounding wilderness as well. Their actions had far-reaching consequences, drawing attention to the illegal logging operations in the region and eventually leading to increased enforcement of forest protection laws. The final and most remarkable chapter of Anna's story with the bears unfolded during the catastrophic forest fires that swept through Siberia in the late summer of that year. The season had been unusually hot and dry, turning the forest into a tinderbox. What began as a series of small fires quickly merged into an unstoppable inferno, destroying everything in its path. Anna first noticed the danger when ash began falling like gray snow around her cabin. The horizon had taken on an ominous orange glow, and the air grew thick with smoke. Local authorities had issued evacuation orders, but with no working phone and the nearest neighbor away visiting relatives, Anna had no way of knowing the full extent of the danger approaching her isolated home. The familiar sound of helicopters flying overhead gave her hope that rescue teams were working to control the blaze. However, the aircraft were focused on protecting the more populated areas, leaving the remote regions to face the fury of the fire alone. As night fell, Anna could see the flames clearly, a wall of orange and red that devoured the forest with terrifying speed. The wind shifted without warning, driving the fire directly toward her cabin. The heat became unbearable, and breathing grew difficult as smoke filled the air. Anna knew she needed to evacuate, but in the darkness and confusion, she had no idea which direction would lead to safety. The roar of the approaching fire drowned out all other sounds, and the smoke had become so thick she could barely see more than a few feet ahead. Just as panic began to overwhelm her, familiar shapes emerged from the smoky darkness. Boris, Natasha, and Misha appeared at her cabin, but their behavior was different from any previous encounter. They showed obvious agitation, moving restlessly and making urgent vocalizations. Boris approached Anna's porch and began pawing at her door with unprecedented urgency. When Anna stepped outside, coughing from the smoke, Natasha gently but firmly pressed against her legs, steering her away from the cabin. The bear's intention became clear. They were there to guide her to safety, but what happened next demonstrated an understanding of fire behavior that amazed even veteran forest firefighters. Instead of heading directly away from the flames, the bears led Anna along a route that seemed at first to be wrong. Boris took the lead, choosing a path that wound through the forest in what appeared to be a confusing pattern. Natasha stayed close to Anna, occasionally steadying her when she stumbled in the poor visibility, while Misha brought up the rear, constantly watching their backs. Their circuitous route soon revealed its wisdom. The bears were leading her around areas where the fire would soon spread, guided by their superior understanding of wind patterns and terrain. They crossed streams at their shallowest points, navigated around treacherous ravines, and avoided areas with thick undergrowth that would soon become deadly fire traps. For hours, they traveled through the smoke-filled forest. When Anna grew exhausted, the bears would stop, allowing her to rest briefly. When she was overcome by coughing, they led her to a small stream where she could drink and catch her breath. Their patience and attentiveness spoke of something far deeper than animal instinct. Near dawn, they finally reached a large clearing where rescue teams had established an evacuation center. As emergency workers rushed to help the elderly woman who had emerged from the smoke-filled forest, they were stunned to see 3 large bears calmly watching from the tree line. Only when Anna was safely in the care of medical personnel did her guardians melt back into what remained of the forest. The fire ultimately destroyed Anna's cabin and much of the surrounding forest. When she was finally allowed to return to assess the damage, she discovered something extraordinary. While everything for kilometers around had burned, there was a small radius around the ruins of her cabin, where the bears had apparently worked to clear leaves and debris in the days before the fire. They had created a crude firebreak, attempting to protect her home even before leading her to safety. This final act of protection made international news. Wildlife behaviorists and animal cognition experts came from around the world to document the case. The bears' actions demonstrated not just intelligence and memory, but complex problem-solving, empathy, and what appeared to be a deep sense of reciprocal loyalty. In television interviews and newspaper articles, Anna would repeat the same simple truth. She had once shown kindness to 3 orphan cubs, and they had repaid that kindness 1,000-fold. Her story became a powerful reminder that compassion, even toward wild creatures, could return in ways that defied explanation. The bears still visit Anna in her new cabin, built by volunteers touched by her story. They appear regularly, checking on their elderly friend, maintaining their protective watch over her property. Their continued presence serves as a living testament to the extraordinary bonds that can form between species and the power of kindness to transcend the natural order in remarkable ways. In this remarkable tale from the Siberian wilderness, we witnessed how a simple act of kindness by an elderly woman transformed into an extraordinary story of loyalty, protection, and gratitude. Anna Petrovna's decision to save 3 orphan bear cubs not only changed their fate, but led to a series of miraculous interventions that saved her own life multiple times. From rescuing her during a deadly blizzard to protecting her from dangerous loggers and ultimately guiding her to safety through a devastating forest fire, these bears demonstrated an intelligence and gratitude that challenged our understanding of wild animals. If this incredible story has moved you, consider becoming a voice for wildlife protection in your own community. Support local wildlife sanctuaries, speak out against poaching, and remember that every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the potential to return to us in ways we never imagined. After all, Anna's story proves that compassion knows no boundaries, not even between species. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary tales of animal loyalty and human kindness that will warm your heart and restore your faith in the natural world.